And it's Ken Kraetzer for CBSI Services, Talking Business. We're in Washington, D.C. today. I have a chance to visit with Rebekah Johnson from Numeracle, who is working on some very key projects related to stopping robocalls, but allowing brands to continue to be able to reach their customers through voice methods. Rebekah, good to see you.
You too. Thanks for having me again.
Always a pleasure. You're really an industry leader on this. You're in some national publications. What is the latest now? There's so much uproar about stopping robocalls, calls that are disturbing everybody right now, but allowing brands like the banks that we work with, 1,000 banks we work with at CBSI, to continue to be able to reach their customers through voice methods. What's the latest?
So it's a really interesting topic because this time we actually have the House, the Senate, and all 50 AGs interested in solving the same problem. They're using somewhat of the same tactics to stop the unwanted robocalls, but there are some serious challenges in their approaches that creeps over into blocking or mislabeling the wanted calls of your consumers and subscribers.
Well, certainly the robocall is something that's been the biggest complaint that attorney generals and national consumer organizations have been receiving. We heard from the Federal Trade Commission last year on this. What are some of the remedies that the regulators are looking at doing?
So one that's getting the most traction and the one I believe that will pass is the Traced Act. Now this one specifically calls out stir shaken, and you've probably heard the national news start to pick up this term. And what this means is that they're looking for a way to ensure that calls originate from a location that they can identify. Because one of the challenges with this problem is anyone can use the voice channel and pretend to be someone they are not. They could pretend to be a bank and actually perform scams on consumers. So this is a positive, but the problem is the additional steps that are being taken to block calls and making sure that they actually are truly fraudulent calls. That we're still trying to solve.
What is the real challenge in stopping robocalls? We know many of these calls are being sent by foreign sources, origins. What are some of the ways that robocalls could be reduced?
Well, I think with the entrance of the analytics that each of the top-tier carriers have implemented in order to identify calls as scam or fraud likely, that's a good step. That's one measure. But taking it to the next step of signing calls to ensure we know where they originate, because enforcement is a key element of what we're trying to achieve here. And the FCC is really trying to be able to expand their reach and also shorten the time frame it takes in order to identify those truly fraudulent actors. So it's not going to be one law that passes that solves problems. It's not going to be one tactic. It is a multitude and layers of tactics. And stir shaken is just one of many that we're looking at.
And you mentioned the FTC and the FCC. We've heard them being very active. This is something they hear from. They get thousands of complaints from consumers on a regular basis. What are the federal regulators looking at doing?
So they are looking at expanding their enforcement ability. We know we've seen examples of enforcement coming down in the millions, and we've only collected around $6,000. So it's not really a big, scary punishment to deter fraudulent actors. So that is one thing the FCC is looking to expand. They're also looking to require the carriers to implement stir shaken. So we can come up with a great idea, but if the FCC does not have the ability to enforce the carriers to implement these new tactics, then we're not getting any progress and we're not getting anywhere. And I think they're going to achieve that through the Traced Act.
You know, we work, as I said, with nearly 1,000 banks at CBSI, including some of the largest. And there are times when they need to reach customers to say they may think there's fraudulent activity on account, or they may be reacting to a problem a customer may be having while traveling. What are some of the ways a bank who needs to reach their customers can ensure that the customer realizes that it's a legitimate call?
So that is a current challenge and a current problem for the banks today, financial institutions. With the entrance of the analytics, your calls could be labeled fraud or scam. I am a consumer who's had one of my credit card fraudulent notification calls labeled as a scam. I did not appreciate that. I missed out on an opportunity to ensure that my card would still operate. So what you can do today is register your numbers. Now, my company is an example of one where banks can come to and we evaluate you to ensure you are who you say you are, and then we register your numbers in the ecosystem to at least achieve that it's not a fraud or a scam. But that's wave one. The next wave is they really need to watch and monitor what happens with Stir Shaken, because there will be additional steps and actions that the banks will need to take in order to ensure their calls continue to go through.
And Rebekah, you are an expert on this process that's been developed as a remedy to fight robocalls called Stir Shaken. Very technical. It's been in development for a number of years. Where is that at, and how could a bank possibly benefit using that?
So this is interesting because it's going to require the carriers to do something. What the carriers are doing at the origination of the call, so whoever the bank is working with as their carrier to deliver calls, they should be asking them, what are you doing to implement Stir Shaken? How are you going to sign my calls? Will my calls be fully attested? So it changes a little bit of the relationship between the bank and their carrier. So simply just reach out to them and find out where they're at. If they do not know what Stir Shaken is, you got a problem.
And Rebekah Johnson from Numeracle, tell us a little bit about the services that your company provides.
Thank you. So our services are really focused on the industry that's delivering communications. We cover financial, bank, also healthcare, emergency communications, education communications as well, to ensure that your calls are not labeled fraud or scam. And we are preparing you for that next wave with the Stir Shaken as well. So we help you navigate this space so that you're not lost and you get visibility and control over what's happening with your communications as these new changes start to deploy.
Rebekah Johnson, a final thought as we go into, we're getting close to late spring and summer, going into the end balance year. What are some of the things a brand should be thinking about, looking at what state and federal regulators might do, but also ensuring that they're able to reach their customers when they need to?
I think now's the time when you should really be leaning on your associations that you belong to, who are here in DC, keeping in touch with the latest that's going on, and voice your concerns. Understand how these laws impact you. Your associations should help you be able to translate that down, and then lobby on your behalf. My greatest concern right now when it comes to the regulatory side is passing rules and regulations that stop wanted calls. There is not enough voice on the wanted call side, and that is becoming very evident in the actions and the bills that we're seeing proposed.
Rebekah Johnson, CEO of Numeracle here in Washington, D.C. Thank you. You are an industry leader on this issue.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Great to visit with you. This is Ken Kraetzer for CBSI Services Talking Business today in Washington, D.C.